The distant wail of a train whistle pierced the still Arizona dawn as Faith Taylor rushed through the silent streets of Gila City, clutching a hastily packed carpet bag. Her golden hair tumbled free from its pins, and tears streamed down her face as the echo of her father's final words reverberated in her mind. "Choose that penniless drifter, and you are no longer a Taylor. You will be dead to us." The year was 1878, and at 21, Faith had just sacrificed everything: her family's fortune, her social standing, and her place in Boston's elite society for a love her parents deemed inappropriate. 3 months ago, while visiting her aunt in this dusty frontier town, she had met William Lawson, a cattle rancher with calloused hands and dreams bigger than the Arizona sky. Faith paused at the town's edge, her breath coming in quick gasps. The morning stage to Tucson wouldn't leave for another hour, and William had promised to meet her here. Doubt crept into her heart as she watched the sun crawl higher. Had he changed his mind? Had her father's men found him first? Faith. She whirled at the sound of his voice, relief flooding through her. William rode toward her, his chestnut mare kicking up dust. At 26, he cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of weathered denim. He dismounted in one fluid motion and caught her in his arms. "I feared you wouldn't come," she whispered against his chest. "I'd ride through hell itself to reach you." William pulled back to search her face. "Did they hurt you?" Faith shook her head. "Just words, but father means what he says. I've been disowned, cut off without a penny." William's jaw tightened. "Your father sent a man to my ranch last night, offered me $5,000 to leave Gila City and never contact you again." Faith's heart lurched. "What did you do?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I told him I'd rather have one day loving you than a lifetime with all the money in Boston." He brushed away a tear from her cheek. "My family will be yours now, Faith. My mother, my sisters, they're already planning a welcome supper. But your ranch is modest compared to what you're used to." "I don't care about that," Faith said firmly. "I care about you." William helped her onto his horse and mounted behind her. As they rode away from Gila City, Faith didn't look back at the elegant hotel where her family was staying. Instead, she leaned into William's strength and focused on the horizon, where their future waited. The Lawson Ranch lay 15 miles outside town, nestled in a valley with mountains rising purple in the distance. A simple 2-story house of sturdy pine stood at the center of the property, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's my mother," William said softly. "She's been up since dawn baking bread for you." Elizabeth Lawson was a sturdy woman in her 50s with William's same blue eyes and an expression that warmed when she saw Faith. Behind her, 2 younger women appeared, William's sisters, Mary and Rebecca. "Welcome home," Elizabeth said, embracing Faith as she dismounted. "Any woman brave enough to choose love over fortune is welcome in this family." Faith felt tears threatening again. "Thank you, Mrs. Lawson. Call me Elizabeth, or Mother if you'd prefer." She squeezed Faith's hand. "Come inside. You must be exhausted." The Lawson home was nothing like the Taylor mansion in Boston. The furniture was practical rather than ornate, the floors wooden instead of marble. But there were touches of beauty everywhere: hand-stitched quilts, wildflowers in mason jars, and windows that framed views of the endless Arizona sky. William's sisters bombarded Faith with questions about Boston fashion, while Elizabeth served a breakfast of eggs, fresh bread, and coffee. Faith answered warmly, though her mind kept returning to the confrontation with her father last night. After breakfast, William took Faith to see the rest of the ranch. The spring air was filled with the scent of sagebrush and pine as they walked among the cattle grazing on the rolling grassland. "I know it's not what you're accustomed to," William said hesitantly. Faith stopped him with a hand on his arm. "William Lawson, I grew up surrounded by wealth and emptiness. My parents' marriage was a business arrangement. I never saw them touch with affection or look at each other with love." She gazed up at him earnestly. "I would rather live in a tent with you than in a palace without you." He kissed her then, tenderly at first, then with a passion that left her breathless. "We'll be married tomorrow," he murmured against her lips. "The Reverend can come to the ranch." "Unless you'd prefer to wait, no," Faith said firmly. "Tomorrow is perfect." That evening, as the family gathered for supper, William's mother presented Faith with a simple gold ring. "This was my mother's," Elizabeth explained. "I'd be honored if you would wear it." Faith slipped it onto her finger, touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful." "A tailor would never settle for something so plain," came a harsh voice from the doorway. Faith turned to see her father, Jonathan Taylor, standing there with two men behind him. Her mother, Caroline, hovered uncertainly in the background. "Father," Faith gasped, "how did you find me? Did you think I wouldn't discover where that cowboy lives?" Jonathan's cold gaze swept the room dismissively. "I've come to take you home, Faith. This foolishness has gone far enough." William moved protectively to Faith's side. "Mr. Taylor, your daughter has made her choice. I suggest you respect it." Jonathan Taylor's face flushed with anger. "Respect? What would you know about respect? You seduced my daughter with wild notions while planning to trap her in poverty." Elizabeth Lawson stepped forward, her dignity a match for Taylor's arrogance. "Mr. Taylor, this is my home and you were not invited into it. Your daughter is welcome here. You, sir, are not unless you can speak civilly." Jonathan's eyebrows shot up at being addressed in such a manner by a rancher's widow. Before he could respond, Faith found her voice. "Father, I love William. Nothing you say or do will change that." She straightened her spine. "You gave me a choice and I've made it." "Then you are no longer my daughter," Jonathan said coldly. "Caroline, come. We're leaving." Faith's mother hesitated, looking at her daughter with tears in her eyes. For a moment, Faith thought she might defy her husband. Instead, Caroline Taylor lowered her gaze and followed Jonathan out. "Mother, please," Faith called after her, but the only response was the sound of carriage wheels on hard, packed earth. That night, Faith cried in William's arms as they sat on the porch swing. "I knew Father would disown me, but I thought Mother might." She couldn't finish. "Give her time," William said gently. "Your mother loves you. She may find her courage yet." The following morning dawned clear and bright. Faith woke in Mary's room where she'd spent the night. Through the window, she could see ranch hands preparing for the day, and beyond them, the vast expanse of William's land. It wasn't the manicured gardens of Boston, but there was a wild beauty to it that called to something deep within her. A knock at the door revealed Rebecca, carrying a white dress. "Mother's wedding gown," she explained. "We stayed up altering it for you." The simple dress fit perfectly. Mary arranged Faith's hair with wildflowers, and Elizabeth presented her with a handkerchief edged in delicate lace. "Something borrowed," she said with a smile. "And now, let's not keep my son waiting. He's been pacing since sunrise." The ceremony took place under an ancient oak tree behind the house. Reverend Thomas officiated while the ranch hands and neighboring families gathered to witness. William's eyes shone with love as Faith approached on Elizabeth's arm. "Who gives this woman?" the Reverend asked. "I do," said Elizabeth firmly. "Her family now gives her in love." The vows were simple, the promises profound. When William placed his mother's ring on Faith's finger, his hand trembled slightly. "With this ring, I thee wed. My heart, my home, my family, all that I am and all that I have is yours." As the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Faith felt a curious sense of completeness wash over her. The loss of her birth family still ached, but around her stood people who valued love over status, character over wealth. The celebration continued well into the evening. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by neighboring women. A fiddler played lively tunes, and William swung Faith around in dances she'd never learned in Boston's ballrooms. During a moment of rest, Faith noticed a carriage approaching. Her heart skipped when she recognized it as her family's. "William," she said, clutching his arm. He followed her gaze and nodded grimly. "Stay here, I'll handle this." "No," Faith said. "We'll face them together." The carriage stopped, and to Faith's surprise, only her mother emerged. Caroline Taylor looked smaller somehow without her husband's dominating presence. "Mother." Faith stepped forward cautiously. Caroline twisted her gloved hands together. "Your father doesn't know I'm here. He's meeting with business associates in Tucson." William nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Taylor, would you care to join our celebration? You've missed the ceremony, but I brought this." Caroline held out a small velvet box. "It's your grandmother's pearls, Faith. I couldn't bear to think of you married without them." Faith opened the box with trembling fingers. The strand of perfect pearls had been promised to her since childhood. "Father will be furious when he discovers they're gone." A flash of something determination perhaps crossed Caroline's face. "Let him be furious. You are my daughter no matter what he says." She hesitated. "May I stay, just for an hour?" Faith embraced her mother tightly. "Stay as long as you like." Caroline Taylor remained until sunset, watching her daughter dance with her new husband, speaking cautiously with Elizabeth Lawson, and even accepting a plate of food from Mary. When she finally departed, she left behind not only the pearls but also a small leather-bound book. "My journal," she explained to Faith. "I've kept it since I was your age. Perhaps it will help you understand and avoid my mistakes." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm Faith had never experienced. She learned to cook over a wood stove, to manage a household with far fewer resources than she'd grown up with, and to find joy in simple pleasures, watching sunrise over the mountains, gathering eggs still warm from the henhouse, falling asleep in William's arms every night. June brought scorching heat to the Arizona territory. The creek that ran through Lawson land slowed to a trickle, and the cattle grew restless. William spent long days moving herds to higher pastures where grass remained green, returning home after dark, exhausted. "The Henderson place has a spring that never runs dry," he mentioned one night as Faith bathed his sunburned shoulders. "Old man Henderson offered to sell me 50 acres around it, but the asking price—" He shook his head. Faith thought of the pearls hidden in their bedroom. "We could sell my grandmother's necklace." William looked up sharply. "Those pearls are your heritage. You are my future," Faith replied simply. "Besides, what good are pearls on a cattle ranch? In the end, they compromised." William took a loan from the bank in Tucson, using the pearls as collateral. The land with its precious spring became part of Lawson Ranch, ensuring their cattle would survive even the harshest drought. July brought not only heat but trouble of a different kind. A gang of cattle rustlers began targeting ranches in the area. The Hendersons lost 20 head, and the Millers lost more. Sheriff Parker organized men into patrol groups, and William often spent nights riding the boundaries of their land. "I don't like leaving you alone," he told Faith one evening as he checked his rifle. "I'm not alone. Your mother and sisters are here, and half the ranch hands are within shouting distance." Faith handed him a packet of food for the night. "Be careful." 3 nights later, Faith woke to the sound of gunfire in the distance. She sat bolt upright in bed, reaching instinctively for William before remembering he was on patrol. Outside, voices shouted, and horses' hooves thundered past the house. Faith threw on a robe and hurried downstairs to find Elizabeth already at the window, a shotgun in her hands. "Stay back from the windows," the older woman warned. "The men will handle this." But Faith couldn't remain still, not when William might be in danger. She paced the kitchen until dawn began to lighten the sky, and finally, horses approached the house. She ran onto the porch to see William dismounting, his face grim. Behind him, two ranch hands led horses with bodies draped over them. "William!" Faith flew down the steps. He caught her, holding her tightly. "I'm all right. We caught the rustlers trying to drive off 30 head of our cattle." His voice was flat with exhaustion. "2 of them didn't survive. The others are headed for the Tucson jail." Over the following days, the story spread throughout the territory. William Lawson and his men had broken up one of the most notorious rustling gangs in Arizona. Neighboring ranchers rode in to thank him, bringing gifts of food and offers of help with his herd. In August, a letter arrived from Boston. Faith recognized her mother's handwriting and tore it open eagerly. The contents made her gasp. "What is it?" William asked, looking up from his coffee. "Mother has left father." Faith's voice shook as she read. "She's taken an apartment in New York. She writes that my courage gave her the strength to seek her own happiness after 30 years of living under father's thumb." William squeezed her hand. "Are you all right?" Faith nodded slowly. "I'm sad for what might have been, but proud of her. She says she may visit us in the spring." "She'll always be welcome here," William assured her. As summer faded into fall, Faith began to suspect a new change in their lives. Her monthly courses had stopped, and certain smells, particularly coffee, which she normally loved, suddenly turned her stomach. When she confided her suspicions to Elizabeth, the older woman smiled knowingly. "I thought as much when you turned green at breakfast yesterday. We should expect a new Lawson around April, I'd say." Faith waited until that evening to tell William. They sat on the porch swing, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I have news," she said, taking his hand. William's entire face transformed when she told him. Joy, wonder, and a touch of fear all played across his features as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." The months that followed were busy ones. William and his ranch hands built in addition to the house 2 new bedrooms for the growing family. Faith sewed baby clothes and planned a nursery while Elizabeth knitted tiny blankets. Winter arrived with unusual force that year. December brought snow to the mountains, and January saw ice forming along the creek banks. Faith, now visibly carrying their child, worried about William as he rode out each day to check on the cattle. In February, a blizzard roared down from the north, blanketing the ranch in 2 feet of snow. For 3 days, the family remained huddled around the fire, venturing out only to tend the animals in the barn. When the storm finally passed, William and his men found 12 cattle frozen in a ravine, but the rest of the herd had survived. On a crisp March morning, Faith was helping Mary prepare breakfast when she felt the first pain, a sharp tightening across her abdomen that took her breath away. "Faith." Mary looked concerned. "Are you all right? I think." Faith gasped as another pain struck. "I think the baby's coming." William was already out checking fence lines. Rebecca rode to fetch him while Elizabeth prepared the bedroom and sent for the midwife in Gila City. The labor progressed quickly. By noon, Faith was gripping Elizabeth's hand through contractions that came relentlessly. The midwife, Mrs. Hollister, arrived just as Faith felt an overwhelming urge to push. "Your body knows what to do," the elderly woman assured her. "Listen to it." William galloped into the yard as Faith's cries reached their peak. He took the stairs 2 at a time but hesitated at the bedroom door. "Come in, son," Elizabeth called. Your wife needs you now." William knelt beside the bed, taking Faith's hand. His face was pale beneath its tan, but his voice remained steady. "I'm here, my love. I'm right here." With a final, tremendous effort, Faith brought their child into the world. The baby's angry cry filled the room, and Mrs. Hollister chuckled. "You have a son, Mr. Lawson. A fine, strong boy." William's eyes filled with tears as he gazed at the red-faced infant. "He's perfect," he whispered. They named him Jonathan Thomas Lawson Thomas for the reverend who had married them, and Jonathan not for Faith's father but for William's own father, who had died years before. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle delivered healthy calves, crops sprouted in the fields, and baby Jonathan grew stronger each day. Faith recovered quickly from the birth, often carrying the baby in a sling as she tended the garden or helped with lighter ranch chores. In late April, a telegram arrived from Tucson. Faith's mother would arrive on the following day's train. William immediately began preparations, ensuring their best guest room was ready and planning a special dinner. When Caroline Taylor stepped down from the Tucson stagecoach, Faith hardly recognized her. Gone were the rigid posture and tight-lipped expression. Her mother looked years younger, dressed in a simpler style than Faith had ever seen her wear. "Faith, my dear," Caroline embraced her daughter warmly, then stepped back to admire the baby in Faith's arms. "And this must be my grandson." William helped Caroline into their wagon, stowing her trunk in the back. "We're pleased to have you, Mrs. Taylor. Please call me Caroline." She smiled at him, actually smiled at the man her husband had called a fortune-hunting cowboy. "After all, we are family now." During Caroline's 2-week visit, Faith watched in amazement as her mother transformed. Elizabeth taught Caroline to make bread, an activity the Boston socialite had never attempted. Caroline held baby Jonathan for hours, singing lullabies Faith hadn't heard since childhood. And most surprisingly, she joined Faith and William on rides across the ranch, her face flushed with excitement as she galloped beside them. "You seem happy, Mother," Faith observed as they sat shelling peas on the porch. Caroline nodded thoughtfully. "I am. For the first time in my adult life, I am making my own choices." She glanced at Faith. "Your father has filed for divorce. The scandal will be enormous. Are you worried about that?" Caroline laughed, a genuine laugh that Faith had rarely heard. "Strangely, no. Boston society seems very small and petty from here." She squeezed Faith's hand. "You were brave enough to choose love over duty. Now I'm trying to be brave enough to choose happiness over convention." When Caroline departed, she left behind a gift, a bank draft for a considerable sum. "Call it an early inheritance," she told Faith and William. "I've realized life is too short to defer happiness until someone dies." The money allowed them to make improvements to the ranch that William had only dreamed of: a larger barn, better breeding stock, a windmill to pump water from the deep well. By summer's end, Lawson Ranch was becoming known throughout the territory for its fine cattle and progressive methods. In October, nearly a year and a half after Faith had been disowned, a letter arrived bearing her father's law firm's seal. Faith's hands trembled as she opened it. "What does he want?" William asked, his voice tight with concern. Faith read the letter twice, her expression changing from apprehension to disbelief. "Father is dying. Consumption, the doctors say." She looked up at William. "He wants to see me and meet his grandson before it's too late." William's jaw clenched. "After how he treated you. After disowning you and trying to bribe me. He's still my father." Faith touched William's arm. "If it were your father, wouldn't you want the chance to make peace?" The journey to Boston took nearly a week. They left baby Jonathan with Elizabeth and the sisters, not wanting to risk his health on such a long trip. The city felt foreign to Faith, now too crowded, too noisy, too confined after the open spaces of Arizona. The Taylor mansion on Beacon Hill stood exactly as Faith remembered it, imposing and coldly elegant. A servant led them to Jonathan Taylor's bedroom, where the once powerful man lay wasted by illness. "Faith," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came." "Yes, Father." Faith approached the bed, William a solid presence behind her. Jonathan's gaze moved to William. "You've taken good care of her." "We've taken care of each other," William replied evenly. Jonathan nodded weakly. "I was wrong about both of you." He fumbled for Faith's hand. "Can you forgive an old man's pride?" Faith felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, Father, I forgive you." They remained in Boston for 2 weeks, until Jonathan Taylor drew his last breath with Faith holding his hand. The funeral was attended by Boston's elite, many of whom whispered behind their hands about Faith's unsuitable husband. She found she didn't care. The will, read the following day, contained a surprise. Jonathan had changed it shortly after receiving Faith's news of Jonathan's birth. She inherited 1/3 of his considerable fortune, to Faith Taylor Lawson and her descendants, with my blessing and apology. On the train back to Arizona, William was unusually quiet. When Faith asked what troubled him, he sighed heavily. "Your father's money changes things. You could live anywhere now, have anything you want." He met her eyes reluctantly. "Do you regret choosing the ranch, choosing me?" Faith took his face in her hands. "William Lawson, listen carefully. I fell in love with you, not your ranch, and certainly not poverty. The money changes nothing except that our son will have opportunities we might not have been able to provide otherwise. And you still want to be a rancher's wife, when you could return to Boston society." Faith laughed and kissed him soundly. "I want to be your wife, wherever that takes us. But I must admit, I've grown rather fond of Arizona sunsets and cattle drives." William relaxed visibly. "Well, good, because I've been thinking about expanding the herd next spring." They arrived home to find baby Jonathan taking his first unsteady steps, Elizabeth and the sisters cheering him on. The house smelled of apple pie, and through the window, Faith could see the ranch hands bringing in cattle for the night. That evening, after Jonathan was asleep and the house had quieted, Faith and William sat on their porch swing watching stars appear over the mountains. "I was thinking," Faith said, nestling against William's shoulder. "Perhaps we could use some of Father's money to build a school. Gila City has none, and there are enough children now to warrant one." William nodded thoughtfully. "A fitting legacy." "Education was important to your father, wasn't it?" "Yes, and I was thinking we might name it after both our fathers, the Taylor Lawson School." She glanced up at him. "What do you think?" "I think it's perfect." William pulled her closer. "Just like the woman who suggested it." Faith smiled, remembering that desperate morning 2 years ago when she'd stood at the edge of Gila City with nothing but a carpet bag and a broken heart. She'd lost one family then, but gained another one built on love rather than obligation, on choice rather than expectation. "I made the right choice," she murmured, more to herself than to William. He heard her anyway and pressed a kiss to her hair. "We both did." And as night deepened over Lawson Ranch, Faith realized that sometimes the bravest choice was the simplest one, to follow your heart, whatever the cost. She had lost a fortune and found a home, been disowned by one family and embraced by another. Most importantly, she had discovered that love, real love, was worth every sacrifice. "My family will be yours," William had promised on that fateful morning. Looking back now, Faith understood it hadn't just been a promise, it had been prophecy. A vision of the life they would build together, here under the vast Arizona sky.